I think it needs to sound like a shitty intro, like a funny shitty intro.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Astrology Roast. My name is Karen.
My name is Itai and we are back in 2020, bitches.
We sure are. Happy 2020 everyone. Who knew that we'd make it to this next decade?
Oh my God.
One of my dad's brothers, my uncle, was very adamant that 2020 is actually not the beginning of the next decade. It's 2021. But I just think for the sake of just enjoying saying 2020 and saying happy new decade, like fuck that. We are in the new decade as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very pleased and happy to be here. Itai, how was your New Year's? How are you coping? How are you feeling? You know, so many people out there are yearning to know.
Wow. Well, I don't know. Well, there's so much to say. First of all, I want to say that unlike the popular opinion, I really loved reading and watching all the end of decade summaries. You know how people would put on their Instagram stories like a picture from every decade, and everyone was like, enough, I can't fucking see this anymore. I really loved it. I think that it was a horrible decade, and it was just nice to see. It was nice to see what we're chucking out and what we're leaving behind. I feel like, you know the sentence if you don't know your past, your present is dull and your future is unpredictable. So I feel like I really know my past now. I really know the past decade. It's been shit for everyone. But
I didn't see any snapshots of the past decade of people that were miserable, or, you know, photos of them when they had their wisdom teeth out, or when they were eating ice cream after a breakup, or when,
really?
You know, the Britney shaving hair moment. I saw nothing around that. It was just people that had just recently gotten into successful relationships, posting 10 different pictures of them doing pottery with their new boyfriend and going to the beach with their new boyfriend, or, you know, meeting the parents of their new boyfriend. That was the summary of their entire decade. Whereas all these people I know that have had horrible, hard, interesting, but terrible decades didn't post diddly squat.
Well, I did.
In Australia, it's a term for nothing.
I did post a picture of before I got my hemorrhoids and then a picture of after I got my hemorrhoids, which was it was a very significant change that I went through this decade living with hemorrhoids. You know, it comes and it goes, but still. Anyway, what was your question again? Yeah, what did I do on New Year's Eve? So I actually had a really meaningful New Year's Eve. Some would say not your classic, not your average kissing at midnight at Times Square, you know, as most people do. Mine was in Jerusalem. I will say one day I will do it. I have to. This is my ultimate movie moment, to kiss at midnight at Times Square, but that's probably 2021, to be more realistic. So basically, I went to Jerusalem, to the holy city, to a drag show for the New Year's Eve. But why it was so different, because I went with my mom and my sister and my sister-in-law to see the drag show of this kid that grew up in the house next door to our house. And so my sister is 10 years younger than me, and one of the boys in her classroom was doing that show. They're both 20 now. So it was just a weird experience because, first of all, his family doesn't support him. So it was us going to support him, as the family next door. But it was also weird because it's Jerusalem. So everything in Jerusalem has an off taste, not in a bad way. It's just different. A drag show or a gay party are just always, it's you know, those class parties, when your teachers would bring snacks and there will be a party in your, it feels like that. Everything in Jerusalem feels like that.
Yes.
So just imagine being there with your mom and your friends and your sister and your sister-in-law. And half of the people are religious, so it's actually really cool to see this mix, this unexpected mix. And I was dancing next to someone, and he looked a bit awkward, so I was like, hey, what's your name? Like trying to be nice to him so he'll feel more comfortable. And he was like a religious guy. And he goes, this is my first time at a party like this. And I was like, oh my God, take your dick out. No, I wasn't. I was like, how do you feel? And we had a chat, and it was really nice. And then it was midnight, and a few people were kissing, and I was just like hugging two of my really good friends, and I told them the Charlotte sentence that we really love. And I was like, what if we could be each other's soulmates and guys could be just this fun thing to play with? And that was my midnight kiss.
Oh my gosh, I wish I'd had that line to tell to my New Year's squeeze, which was my friend's cat that was sitting anxiously on its cat stand the whole night, and I just like looked at her the whole night, and the cat looked back at me, and I looked at the cat, and I was like, will she, won't she? Like, what's going to happen when it, 12 o'clock hits? And then it hit, and I was like, just kind of like patted it slowly. But I wish I was able to say, like, maybe we can just be each other's soulmates. And at least, guys can, guys, I think she's got fleas at the moment. But I was, well, firstly, I'm actually really pleased to hear that you had such a beautiful and meaningful New Year's. I think that's probably the best that one can hope for when you don't wake up the next day hating yourself, hating life, regretting your decisions. It sounds like that you've moved into the next decade with a really beautiful approach, and that's quite rare. I had also a really lovely New Year's spent at a friend's house, maybe with a few couples, but also with the cat that was, my significant other, my plus one for the night.
Cute.
Really cute. Going steady, but it was really nice. Like, I did have some other friends that were trying to tempt me into having a bit more of a wild, traditional, messy New Year's Eve, which always goes terribly wrong and pear-shaped, and you always end up on a tram or a bus and lost, and everyone's kissing around you, and you're depressed, and you miss your ex-boyfriend, or all of that. So that was on offer as well. Someone's like, oh, come to this party, come to this thing, and I was already at this really awesome thing, so I wanted to stay there. And I was like, wow, I really feel like I'm having my Gwyneth Paltrow sliding doors moment. I mean, I have them, I think I'd have them every day. I have a sliding doors Gwyneth Paltrow moment. Like, will I order, Chinese takeaway, or will I, have like a healthy lunch? Like, this is a moment that could change everything, like the butterfly effect as well. And I was like, oh, well, which Gwyneth am I in this decade? Am I Gwyneth with the short hair that, finds her boyfriend cheating and like changes her life and then ends up with a hot Irishman? Or maybe he's Scottish. Sorry to any Scottish or Irish listeners who maybe feel like we've mixed the two of your cultures together. I know that you're very distinctive and both very, attractive cultures. But I was like, which one am I? Am I short-haired Gwyneth Paltrow in Sliding Doors, or am I long-haired Gwyneth Paltrow that lives a lie? And, my friend was like, lol, you're definitely short-haired Gwyneth. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what that means, but, I still have long, balayage hair, as I've told people many times before. Anyway, we're here in this new decade, and it sounds like we both had pretty nice, meaningful, positive New Year's Eves, without any hot pashes or hot rashes. How did you? Pash. No pash. How do you feel about this energy that we have at the moment with this new decade? Are you feeling positive and light about what's to come, or are you fearful and existential? There's only two options.
To be honest, I think that what people are used to getting from me, maybe from us, from this podcast, is a bit more of the darker approach and the pessimistic side of the equation. But I did start the year, and I don't want to disappoint anyone who's tuning in every week to hear us rant and bitch, but I did start this decade feeling a bit lighter and feeling a bit hopeful. And I think that maybe it's time to come clean to the listeners that I haven't spoken about my job in the past 6 months, but I was working in an advertising agency, which had a lot of positives, but also I didn't feel like I was, making the most of myself. So I quit my job and I started a new job on January 1st, 2020. So that was a very symbolic day to start a new job. But it wasn't just like a job, like starting a new job, like in the technical sense. It felt like I'm choosing something that is for myself and against what people expect me to do, because it's not very common to quit a job after 5 months, and especially not a job that is like in advertising and you need to have it on your resume and people would ask you why you left so early. And I was just like, I miss education. My brain is fried. I'm not enjoying being creative anymore. And so I just quit and started a new thing, and that's it. So I feel like this decade for me is about choosing myself. And I would, to anyone that's listening, I would say my two most important pieces of advice, as you would say in English, are quit your job and break up with your partner.
Okay.
But I say that
wow.
to everyone that comes to me and like, I need to ask you about something, like about their job or their partner before they tell me, I come clean and I'm like, I just want to tell you both my advice, like both things I believe in are that everyone should break up and everyone should quit their jobs. Now, if you want to speak, speak. Yeah.
I feel like that's such a direct approach. Like people often ask me, when they ask me astrologically for advice, they're like, oh, well, should I choose to date someone because of their star sign? And I always respond, listen, like, I don't think, it's more complicated than that. You can't judge people according to their star sign. Personally, I would never go out with a Taurus. It's not for me, but I'm also not for them. So you do you, and like a long-winded approach. But I like that your two pieces of advice are very universal. And, congratulations on making a really positive and important decision to choose your happiness over the structures and norms that we sometimes get tricked into following. I also felt that, New Year's Day, I felt a kind of lightness of being, which I hadn't felt in a long time. And like, okay, I'm down with this. Everyone had a bit of a spring in their step in the city, and it was a really warm, beautiful day. And I chose myself in a bit of a different, less distinctive way than you. I went to the local department store and bought a Calvin Klein bra, which was 50% off, and it looks great. Like, I'm down with it, and it just fits perfectly. And then I went to a bar with some friends, which was floating on the Yarra River, and there was a pool on the bar. There's like a pool deck, and there were people in bikinis lying next to the pool deck, and men wearing loafers and linen shirts and Ray-Ban sunglasses, and then people driving their yachts near the bar and going, hey, yeah, Happy New Year. And I felt like I was in another planet, because if anyone's ever been to Melbourne in Australia, people are often quite miserable. They complain a lot about the weather and they talk endlessly about the football. And it felt like I was in Sydney or the Bahamas or something like that. And everyone was just having the best time of their lives and drinking Aperol spritzes and jugs of pink grapefruit cocktails. So yeah, I just felt like I'd entered into another alternative universe, and I was kind of there as watching, like Julia Stiles, in a Freddie Prinze Jr. movie or something like that. So it felt like a new era and a new decade with the same me participating in the new decade, but along for the ride and really happy to be invited, even as an afterthought, to this new decade. Like, just grateful to be there, essentially.
The decade went like, oh, shit, we forgot to invite Karen.
Shit, that girl. Exactly. But I guess she's probably always free, so we'll probably invite her. Look, I'm happy. I don't care how, what, why. I'm there. And I'd like to say, for the record, I have had a New Year's Pash before at a mansion party in Sydney. So I've spoken about this before, but when I go to Sydney, I change personalities. I become the better version of myself. Sydney, Australia, that is, which is, a wonderful place if you ever can visit. So I have had that kind of Times Square, New Year's Eve wild party followed by a drunk pash, which is, Australian for kiss with a stranger. So I think if I can do it, certainly our listeners can do it. Listen, I also knew a lot of people that stayed home on New Year's and had a reflective, quiet night in. They were like, nah, I'm not into this. I'm not coming into the world until next year. So I think that everyone kind of did the adult decision and knew what they needed, which is pretty cool.
Wow, what a decade. Well, we are an astrology podcast, and, I feel like people sometimes forget that. And by people, I mean us. This job that I had, I would like to make a pause and just astrologically talk about the experience of working in an advertising agency from the astrological world. You know how sometimes we again, something we talk about is when astrology is too real and it's like it can't be a coincidence anymore. Like the people, for example, that you work with, and you see that like every time you work at a place, there's a Leo, and every time that Leo has the same role, So, first of all, I would start by saying that I always, watching The Devil Wears Prada, even though she works at Vogue, it is some kind of advertising, it's like they're advertising for fashion, you can say. So that's at least what I told myself to pretend like I am in The Devil Wears Prada. The only problem is that like Anne Hathaway, I feel like is not someone that it's not like pretending you're in Legally Blonde and you're like Elle Woods.
Were you Anne Hathaway or Meryl Streep in this agency? I don't understand the analogy.
That's why I feel like it was hard for me, because the only movie I could compare myself to, even though there's other movies, I felt like it's The Devil Wears Prada, because it was like
have a smile that lights up a room.
Well, just like Anne Hathaway does.
Anyway, rags to riches smile.
So it's even, in my interview, the HR person was like, from a movie, she was like doing all these dramatic questions, like, how would I know you're not just a teacher that's very passionate about education, and he's just doing this gig to check something, and then you will leave us after 3 months. And I was like,
she was on point, wasn't she?
She wasn't psychic, wrong. Maybe. She's wasn't wrong.
Her talents are wasted in HR. She obviously has some psychic capabilities, or she could be an ASIO with, or the Mossad with those investigative questioning techniques.
I wish she was all of these things, but she's just a Taurus, so I don't think that any of it is true. And then she goes, you're in education, you care too much about people. Some days I go home after working here and I ask myself, and I tell myself, you haven't done a thing that was meaningful today. And I was like, what? Obviously, it made me only want to work there even more, because I was like, I have to experience that.
Can I ask you, if you were truly having your Anne Hathaway moment, did you ever have a moment where you had to bring large takeaway coffee for, a manager or a board member, and then you spilt it on someone's shirt by mistake?
And then,
did that happen? Like, I feel like that's very Anne Hathaway / Julia Roberts / all of these feel-good films where they're walking with giant takeaway coffee cups all the time and like making mistakes. Yeah.
Obviously.
Did you do that?
Unfortunately, in
Whilst
Israel,
you were climbing your way to the top?
We don't have Starbucks in Israel, so I couldn't do it, because doing it with any other brand would just feel like, being a traitor or a betrayal of the original. But it did make me realize that wherever you go, you take yourself with you, but also wherever you go, you take your favorite star signs with you. And it was just like my best friends and people that I loved the most in the office were just the star signs that it always happens to me with them. So we all know about the Gemini and Aquarius, but I realized and I learned something, that I can't help it. With all my criticism about Virgos, I really get along with Virgos, and it's hard to admit, but everywhere I worked, there was that Virgo that I became really, really close friends with them, and took them with me to the next chapter. And it's just easier to say Gemini and Aquarius, which also is true.
Look, and I'm sorry if anyone can hear two dogs barking. I'm sitting next to a baby's bassinet in a room filled with babies toys that are absolutely terrifying. So, we're not a professional podcast. I mean, we are a professional podcast. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. We are not a funded podcast that has rooms and spaces. So we record really, in the elements. So at the moment, I'm in a baby's room at my friend's house before she goes to India. But to continue my point,
Yes.
I think the only part of you that finds it difficult to reconcile your love of Virgos is your Virgo moon. I think the only self-critical, self-judging part of you that would find any challenges in your deep connection to Virgos is from that part of yourself, which is a very Virgo quality. So it makes sense that you probably really love their capacity to analyze, and they're very funny and smart, and they get shit done and they don't miss a beat. Like, they're accountable, they're responsive, they're reliable. It makes sense. And I think the only person that wouldn't understand that would be your Virgo moon.
I know. It's hard for me to feel empathy to myself. Therefore, it's hard for me to feel empathy to a Virgo. But yeah, they are so funny. And I think I had the privilege of working with some of the funniest people I've ever met. And one of them was a Virgo, walking around with a note open. Every time I mentioned something about a star sign, he would open his notes and add to the list. So he made this essay about like which star sign is what. And every time I would say something that would contradict something that I said already, he would just like take his phone out and be like, "You just said that a week ago, so what the fuck is happening?" And I would be like,
Wow.
"No," but and then I would have to like explain it and do my most common excuse whenever astrology doesn't add up. You need to see the whole chart. You need to see the whole chart.
I was going to say, I've got my own excuses for when people like prove me wrong and say, wait, that doesn't fit. That makes no sense what you just said. I just say, listen, it's not a science, it's an art. And I also say you need to see someone's whole chart because it's complicated, and also how the planets speak to each other, what are the houses, it's complicated. I also say, listen, the jury's out on that one. We're still waiting for confirmation from NASA. What's with that planet? Does it mean that? So you just say these lines and then you put, your magic time ball, which explodes, and then you run into the darkness before people can realize that you're a fraud or a charlatan.
Oh my
and you've
God.
stolen their phones. I always have the same star signs that I'm drawn to in the office as well. I worked with a beautiful Leo who I was catching up with on New Year's Day, with a Leo and a beautiful Pisces from one of my many workplaces, on that very boat deck with all the people in their Aperol spritzers and their boat shoes. And he was severely depressed because he recently got his driver's license renewed, and he's like devastated that his new photo that has been selected isn't as hot as his previous younger photo, and he's tried to call up the facility to try and get it changed, or can he get a new photo, what can he do? And they were like, listen, if you lose the license, maybe we can think about getting a different photo. And he's like, I'm just going to have to lose the license and pay for a renewal. I don't know what to do.
You do what you gotta do.
He's so sad about it, and just like, I don't know. I'm always drawn to certain star signs as well. They make the working week much sweeter.
I'll tell you something even more. I was wondering, I was like, okay, this is an advertising agency. Is astrology real? If astrology is real, there will be a certain type of energy here, right? Because it's a creative energy, it's a fast-paced energy, and
Air signs.
Little did I
Fire.
know, only air signs and fire in the whole department. I was working with, in a department of maybe 10 people. One of them was a Cancerian, which was the boss, and the mother of the clan. And everyone else was Leo, Sagittarius, Aries, Gemini, Aquarius, and
Wow.
Libra. That's it. And you can see that it's like the department feels like air and fire, like this rapid,
Wow.
creative, funny, sharp energy. And also the way that the humor is so different. Like the Sagittarius was like the most snappy, sharp, blunt kind of humor. And then you'll have the Aquarius, which just be like, I'll turn around to her or she'll turn around to me, and we'll just start a fake conversation. I'll be like, she'll just be like moving her chair towards me and start by saying, "Thank you for being on my morning show. Tell us more about your initiative about you." And then she'll just make up something, and I'll just roll with it, and we'll have an entire fake morning show, just the two of us. So, and then you have the Virgo, will be more like wordplay and being really sharp and funny with language and with words and with puns. And then you have the Gemini, which was not present at any times and was
always sick. Yeah.
He was physically there, but I would literally start a conversation with him, or he would call me over to talk to me about something, and then I'll start talking and he'll start typing on his phone, and I'll be like, "Wait, what's happening?" It's like if I call you and I'd be like, "Yeah, what do you want?" Like I called you and I'll be like, "What do you want?" That's how I felt.
Yeah, I really understand that. So I am the only Gemini where I work at the moment, and there is about 5 Tauruses. They've all been there for about 15 years. They're not going anywhere. They literally sat down and didn't move. And I feel starved of air. Like there's one chick that's an air sign that talks and tells stories and jokes. She's a Libran. And like obviously we have a really good chat, but otherwise it's just such an earth heavy office that I feel starved. But I have been kind of finding my sophisticated Gemini means of trying to engage myself in the office. So I'll email myself my horoscope so it looks like I'm doing work whilst I'm checking my email. And which I feel terrible about. Or I'll be listening to Nadia Shah, my favourite astrologer, her podcast or one of her videos on my phone, and I'll flip the phone over because most of her videos are on YouTube, so I'll flip it over so it looks like I'm just listening to music, and I'll be then checking my horoscope, which I've emailed to myself from my personal email to my work email, and then I put WhatsApp web on, so it looks like I'm kind of typing, but really I'm just communicating with everyone that I know via WhatsApp. Yes, a very Taurian fix. I've got a Capricorn as well. Like she was upset the other day because we got gifted all these lollies. One was Mars pods, which are like chocolate biscuit lollies, and the other was your traditional gummy bear lollies. And someone mixed the two in the same bowl, and she got really disturbed by that. She's like, "Why would you put the chocolates with the lollies in the same bowl?"
Agree.
I mean, obviously, I agree, but obviously the Libran did it because she thought it would help everyone, even though she's a vegan and a lot of other people are vegans, and now everything was mixed together.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it's a very interesting. I always have been telling people lately, when I find that astrology is maybe a bit too complex or a bit too sophisticated for people to grasp, I tell people to look at the elements. And, so if you're in a very air-centered office or if you're in a very earth-centered office, so you can kind of sense those broader themes, which is a bit easier than understanding the difference between a Libran and an Aquarius. So it makes no surprise to me that you are, in an advertising space, you're covered with fire and air, because that just makes just so much, and with a Virgo getting shit done as well. It's interesting. I'm usually surrounded by a lot of watery signs because I'm in the community sector, which there's a lot of emotional people that are quite dysregulated who want to help others. So I usually fit in quite well there. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, I just realized that I said only fire and air, but then I also spoke about my Virgo friend.
He's writing that down in his list somewhere.
Shit. And also, he's actually listening to this podcast, so I apologize in advance, and I'm sure I'm going to get many WhatsApp messages about it. But also, I also just remembered there is another Virgo in the office, but he's really into working really, really hard, and like sometimes he'll just be there, and I wouldn't realize that he's been there the whole week because he's so dedicated that he's like always on his computer. But I'm not saying I'm sure I'm going to get many WhatsApp messages just because I'm saying that, because I am getting a lot of WhatsApp messages, because the Virgo way of connecting is through, they love to connect. Let's not forget they are the feminine energy of Mercury, just like Gemini is the masculine energy of Mercury. And obviously when we say masculine and feminine is just because old school astrology is backwards, like everything else in this world that's old school. But thing I love the most about astrology is when people ask you about fictional characters, what star sign they were, because it makes you think and it makes you like trying to evaluate these characters. So this Virgo that I'm talking about, and by now already messaged me like 50 messages while listening to this episode, keep sending me like these messages about who's this person's, what's this person's star sign, what's this person's star sign. And obviously if I don't answer in like 30 minutes, there's like a reminder about the text. So he asked me about King Solomon. Like, I don't know if it's a famous character from the Bible for like Christians, or like from the Old Testament for Christians, Muslims, Jews, I don't know, whoever read that book. So we all know King David. Yeah, I guess King David is more famous.
He was a babe, let's be honest.
Yeah, he was a redhead.
I'm hot for King David.
He was a redhead, but I feel like even though the world is being like racist towards redheads, I personally am attracted. But King David,
I have recessive redhead genes in my family, so we have pockets of whole families that have all redheaded children and parents. So I know that if me and King David in a perfect world, if we were to meet in real life, I know that the result of that meeting would be more redheaded communities of this world. And I'm not saying that's a bad or a good thing. I'm just saying that is what would happen. So the jury is out on that one.
According to Judaism, the Messiah is going to be this what's the son of like this what's the word?
The ancestor?
Descendant. The descendant of King David. So the Messiah is going to be a redhead. So if you're a racist towards redheads, like watch your fucking self, because the fucking Messiah is going to be a redhead. And like things going to change around here. Anyway, King Solomon was King David's son. And you know how much we love stories from the Bible on this podcast. King Solomon has a really well-known story. And when my Virgo friend asked me what star sign was King Solomon, I had to think and dig back and ask myself, what would he be? So I want to share the story of King Solomon, and maybe people could then learn something about the love of a mother as well, because that's the moral of the story. So the story goes, two women came to King Solomon, and in the Bible, these two women, it doesn't just say two women, it says two whores. So I'm going to adjust the story.
I mean, really, they're the same word in the Bible, aren't they? Women, whores, same, synonymous.
Exactly.
No different.
So two whores, two women, whatever you prefer to call.
Men, king, same word in the Bible.
They came to King Solomon. The two whores came to the men, and the king, and they said, we both gave birth to a baby on the same day, but they only came with one baby. And one woman said, the woman that was holding the baby said, this woman came to me in the middle of the night, her baby died, and she took my baby, and she's saying that it's her baby. What do we do? How do you know whose baby it is? So it was like a trial, and King Solomon had to give the final sentence. So he said, give me a sword and I will cut this baby into two, and one of you will have an half and the other one will have the other half. So one woman said, no, I'd rather her have the baby, just leave it, keep it alive, but just give it to her if that's what it means. And the other woman said, no, if you can't have him, I can't have him. Cut the baby in half. And then King Solomon said, give it to the woman that gave up on him, because a true mother will prefer her son to be living somewhere else than dead. And the fake mother will be like, yeah, cut him enough. I don't care. He's not my baby. So I was like, okay, what star sign is that judge? What star sign would do that trick? to teach people a lesson, risking the life of an innocent baby.
Oh, I don't know. It feels like he's having a bit of a laugh. Like, it feels like he's just having fun in a way, in a really
100%.
severe way. So I feel like he's kind of an air sign in a way, but also a Leo.
He's also the guy who wrote all the like psalms and songs.
The Psalms.
I don't know how you
The
say
songs
it.
of songs.
Song of Songs.
Was he hot? Was he hot?
Well, I feel like he's the son of King David, and he wrote poetry. He must have been ugly, like unlike his dad. He must have been like growing up in the shadow of his.
Well, to answer your question, I mean, I would answer you with another question. If that was your dad as King Solomon, or no, if your dad was the mum having to choose between that, like, do you think that he would give you away or he'd let you be chopped up?
I don't think my dad would even come to the trial. My dad would be like,
He's like, oh,
this
what? I got
baby
the
ain't
date
mine.
This redheaded baby ain't my baby.
No, I now remember that King Solomon had 1,000 women. Like it said in the Bible that he like had 1,000 women. It doesn't mean he was hot. It just
Wait,
mean he
1,000
was a
women
king.
or 1,000 whores?
Well, does it even matter? He had it says women specifically, but yeah. But yeah, I think he was ugly. I feel like he was ugly.
Okay, so what sign do you think he was? You know, making this grand trial and test for these two poor mothers who were trying to keep their baby for themselves and not have it chopped into half.
I was like into poetry, a bit of mischief, having a laugh. Gotta be an Aquarius or a Sagittarius.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
And also something about that like teaching lessons.
Yeah, I would say more than a Sagittarius because an Aquarius is a bit more disconnected and a bit more global and universal. I would feel like it seems like he's having too much fun and he's too invested. He could even be a Libran because it's just like about what is the actual most fair option, even if we have to cut someone in half. Like it seems to be quite a severe but a really rational approach. It's so intense. Like it's times like that you realize the Bible is possibly a very underrated like telenovela waiting to be made that is entertaining and wild. And, you know, maybe in 2020 we need to give the Bible a more thorough read. I don't know.
I know. We do have an episode on this podcast called The Bible in which we talk about stories
Or maybe
from
we
the
need
Bible.
multiple episodes about the Bible. I don't know. I didn't even know that King Solomon wrote poetry or that King David was a redhead or that he had 1,000 women. I mean, it's very interesting and it's very relatable to daily life, about how modern decision making could learn a lot from the Bible.
It's true. Well, in Israel, the Bible really went deep into pop culture. Like one of the biggest hit songs from the previous decade is called One of 1,000 and One in 1,000, and the chorus is like, you are not Solomon and I am not one in 1,000. You're just a human, so don't waste my time. So, and it's by like a rapper and a woman, like a rapper
A rapper and a woman. They can't be both. They can't be both. Well, so, we've gone from a decade, we've gone from BCE when women were referred to as whores. And, in the last decade that we've just left behind, women were women, but they definitely can't be rappers. And I'm hoping that in this current decade that women can be rappers as well. Like that we're going to get to a stage when you say the word rapper and it might be a woman, it might be a man, it might be someone that's, identifies as, neither a man nor a woman. I would like permission. I mean, I know that this is a decade where we're feeling a bit lighter, but I would like to make point of the fact that it actually has been quite a severe New Year's Eve, a severe couple of weeks in Australia. So our entire country is basically burning. People have lost their lives, their homes, their livelihoods, and we're in a state of emergency. Huge swathes of the environment is experiencing devastating bushfires. Wildlife, animals have been lost, people, whole communities have been devastated, mainly in New South Wales and Victoria, although there's been fires elsewhere as well. So it has felt like such a crazy and intense time. So even in Victoria, where I live, in Melbourne, we've seen the smoke haze, which is as a result of the bushfires, which are, hours away, but people are being so significantly impacted by it. I know that Kim Kardashian has actually even posted about it, saying that climate change is real, because people are finally connecting the dots that, the way that we treat our planet and the world impacts the way that our environment behaves. And I feel that, Kim Kardashian, even Bette Midler, who, she's not really an influencer, but she is still a celebrity. And she has been tweeting and posting about, climate change and the Australian bushfires and the lack of political leadership in our country in response to our environmental crisis that we're facing. So I feel like once Kim Kardashian is saying in capital letters, climate change is real on social media, I feel like power structures are going to change and shift, and it might be in a terrifying way, but it could be in a really positive way if we make sure that the messages that are being disseminated are ones that are, ones that serve the better of this planet and community and our society, and, so that we actually have another decade to go into and we're not all completely destroyed. I just want to, mention that, and I hope that everyone, that's listening, if you've been impacted by that, you're, staying safe, and obviously my love and care goes out to everyone, that's suffering through this time. And, for those that are overseas, I know that people have been watching it on CNN and BBC, and, it's going pretty wild on Twitter and Kim Kardashian. So, yeah, just, try and stay connected to that. And there's ways to donate. So you just have to look online, and there's heaps of ways that we can help out during this time as well.
Oh, I hope that it will be the truth, and that 2020 is going to be the beginning of time where people actually change. And I feel like, I don't know, because on one hand, you see that it is a very progressive time that we live in comparison to not only the Bible, but even the times when you and I were kids, like 20 years ago. But then there's still
when women were whores, and now they're rappers.
But then there's still so many, like, the rates of anti-Semitism and transphobia and homophobia and racism and all this and violence, and it's still up. So it's weird how the perception is that we're in a better time, but then in the streets people are still going through all this shit. So I don't know if it means that it's going to be better or worse, but at least astrological, we're going towards the age of Aquarius, and religion is supposed to be a bit less an equal egalitarianism. Is that a word?
That is definitely a word. And I think, we still have the Bible that we can refer to, so don't freak out. I think with the age of Aquarius, things are going to get a little freaky, and kinky and weird. I think we also went through this Uranus-Taurus connection. I think it was last year that people were talking about that. And anyone that's an astrologer that listens to this, I'm so sorry, because I mush all of these things together because I read about them and I think about them and I feel them, but I forget exactly what they mean. But I remember it was about Uranus and Taurus doing some very important things. And Uranus is about, revolution and complete change and upheaval. And Taurus is about our earth. And, you can read it as also financing and banking and ownership, but it's also the actual ground in which we live in and how we treat it and how we behave. So if we look at this from a positive way, maybe we're going to learn to care for the environment, our bodies, the world, the animals, all the things that we do. That might be, Beyonce and Jay-Z going vegan, or Kim Kardashian saying that climate change is real. Or it might be really evil things happening, like Donald Trump, saying that wind turbines kill birds. But it's really important that we consider this. So there's a lot of ways to interpret it, but, we will still try and be here if we're alive to tell the tale and be hopeful. I know this has been, maybe both a pessimistic and an optimistic reflection on kind of this hangover period that we've had.
And a misogynistic
Oh, well,
episode.
Yeah, that too. It's good to have that as well. But, I hope things get a bit better and that the influences that we follow religiously, because in the age of Aquarius, I suppose we're probably going to follow celebrities instead of God, instead of redheaded people. I don't know. So I hope things get a bit lighter.
I'm down.
You are down.
So next episode, we want to do something a bit special. So I actually have 2 call to actions, 2 questions to you, our amazing listeners. One of them is we thought about doing an episode called Jury's Out, in which we just go through things that we don't want to answer, and the answer to all of them is jury's out on that one. So the question that I'm asking here is, should we do the episode? Yes or no? It's very simple.
And don't respond with saying the jury's out on whether we should do it, because that's really annoying.
Oh my God, that's only a Gemini would think about that. Thanks for giving the listeners an option that is a Gemini option as well.
Yeah, I think the Gemini version of jury's out would be if someone asks you, hey, we've been dating for a while, are you into me? And you just say, look, the jury's out on that one, I'll get back to you. And then you obviously skip town.
The jury's out, and by jury, I mean myself. I'm not in this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not my real name.
Don't look me up. The other question is we want to do an episode about Tinder horror story and online dating, astrologically speaking, but also the human experience. So if you have a story that is a horror story from Tinder, from Scruff, from Bumble, from Beehive, from, I don't know, I'm making up names, Hinge, whatever it is for you, please send it to us. Also, obviously specify the star signs. If you're a listener of this podcast and you want to send us a story, maybe send it to our personal Instagrams, because we're also going to put a shout out on the Instagram, and there's going to be people that aren't listening to this podcast. They're going to share stories, but we want to share the stories of the actual listeners. So if you want your message to be a listener message and won't be lost in the messages of the official Instagram, then message our personal Instagram, which you can find on the bio of the Astrology Roast Instagram account.
And if you're single and ready to mingle, maybe just send us your height, your weight, your preferences, your star sign and your moon sign, and we can also read that out, and maybe we'll be able to set you up with another Astrology Roast listener who's also looking for love. And I might also say, if you're going to send us your Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, Scruff, Hornet, Plenty of Fish horror stories, I don't want to hear any stories from people or listeners saying, I was on Tinder and I met the love of my life and they're a Taurus and now we've been together 5 years. Lol, it's amazing what online dating can do. No, I don't want to hear stories like that. This is not that kind of podcast. There's a whole world out there that's, ready to receive pictures of that sentiment, poetry, all of that. That world is for you. No, Astrology Roast is not for that. We want to hear the horror stories. We want to hear the time when you spilt your coffee, your takeaway coffee on the love of your life. We want to hear people that ghosted you. We want to hear about people you've ghosted and why. And we want to hear about how you're interacting with dating in the modern age. How are you finding it in this kind of so-called age of Aquarius? Is it working for you? Any hot tips for how to do it? But yeah, no happy endings, please.
Even though, let's be honest, what is more terrifying than a normal functioning relationship that I met someone and it just happened, it clicked. I don't know. To me, I'd rather be ghosted, to be honest.
Well, that's the thing. I don't want to have to put a trigger warning on the next episode because I know people will be distressed by that. I don't want to upset people. So, look, I appreciate it. I validate people's experiences, but I think it could be disturbing, particularly for any of the, the Aries and the air signs that listen to this. That could be quite stressful for them. So, no, we won't have that. 100%. But we're really happy to be here in 2020. I hope you've all had a beautiful, beautiful New Year's, whatever you chose to do. Thank you for listening to Astrology Roast. And we'll see you next time, also on Astrology Roast.